Let's start with Ralph Chassé. Born on January 6, 1900 in New Orleans to mixed black and French Creole parents, Ralph Chassé spent the majority of his formative years traveling back and forth between New Orleans and Chicago. At 17, he developed an interest in painting and in 1918 attended the Chicago Art Institute for a single year. This constituted his only formal training as a painter. He then returned to New Orleans, training as an actor, stage manager, and makeup artist. In 1928, he and his family moved to San Francisco. Though his birth certificate identified him as black, upon moving to San Francisco, given the brutal laws and climate of the period, the Chassé family passed for white, though much of Chassé's work was centered around African American history and culture. Working with the local puppeteer and artist Blanding Sloan, Chassé uses theatrical and artistic training to carve puppets, build sets, and produce such complex adult-oriented marionette shows as Hamlet, Richard III, and The Emperor Jones. Though the Great Depression wreaked havoc on the artistic community at large, puppetry flourished under the Federal Works Project, in which the government employed millions to execute public works projects from the construction of railroads to the design and execution of massive murals. And so Ralph Chassé formed the Vagabond Puppets, a part of Oakland's Department of Parks and Recreation. From 1935 to 1943, Chassé built and mounted new productions of James Stephens' The Crock of Gold, The Mikado, King Lear, and more. Using his skills acquired as a painter and set designer, he created dark, expressionistic sets, filled with deep shadows and stark, angular beams of light. By 1949, he was teaching puppetry at San Francisco State College, where he produced his 1956 Oliver Twist. He went on to produce Brother Buzz, a children's television program performed by an ever-growing cast of his own marionettes. Brother Buzz is the longest-running children's television program in the history of San Francisco, having been on the air for approximately 17 seasons. Remarkably, the Vagabond Puppets survived the transition out of government funding, and Chassé mentored the company's next director, Letty Connell Schubert.
Nice old geezer with a nasty cough sees me and he takes his topper off in a very gentlemanly way. Man says he, I've got some news to tell. Your old Uncle Tom from Camberwell popped all 3 sandwiches, sad to tell, leaving you his little donkey shade. Oh, watch out!
Following this train, Schubert ran the company until sometime in the 1960s, when the reins were passed to a young Frank Osnowitz, the son of Mike and Francis Osnowitz, European puppeteers who had fled Belgium during the Holocaust. They arrived in the United States with trunks full of French perfume and anti-Nazi propaganda puppets. In the years following their move to Oakland in 1950, Francis Osnowitz, who had been a couturier in Belgium, created stunning costumes for Fairyland puppets for the next several decades. His son Frank then shortened his last name to Oz and embarked on an incredibly successful career working on Sesame Street, The Muppets, and various other Jim Henson projects, as well as directing such films as Little Shop of Horrors, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and What About Bob? Let's take a moment to rewind, though. What happened after the WPA program shut down? Well, it depends. Many of the pieces had been neglected to the point of disappearance, and some were simply discarded. However, there were also more sinister occurrences. After the end of the WPA program, much of the work was deemed to be subversive, and the program itself had been controversial from the start. Sometime following the termination of the program and under the direction of local governments, massive numbers of puppets, scenery, and more were seized. The downfall of many such figures was the good documentation. Since they had been employed by the government to be puppeteers, they knew exactly what shows they had built and how many puppets had been created. Upon being ordered to surrender their creations, puppeteers scrambled to substitute as many inferior figures as they reasonably could to hold on to the puppets themselves. Battered and poorly built puppets were chosen to fit the rough descriptions of what they were looking for. However, though some were spared through that attempt, many brilliant works of art were lost forever. After being collected and organized, they were stacked into piles and burned. The Hollywood marionettist Bob Baker witnessed one such occurrence as a teenager in 1940 when the entire collection of the New York City Marionette Unit was publicly burnt. Well, the fire went on for a long time, he said. I watched it for a while. It was just terrible. I wanted to go in there and rescue some of the stuff, but I didn't dare. I was just a little kid.